Welcome back, everyone, to Moving Offline. Today we have Joel Butler from Before Labs, the makers of Before Launcher. And today we're going to have a great conversation about how a simple interface can decrease your screen time and just make you an overall calmer person. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what is Before Launcher and just to get a little bit more details from them and what is coming down the pipeline. Joel, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us a little bit of the inside scoop of what's happening on Before Launcher. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what is Before Launcher.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm probably going to be getting on, the rant about attention and things like that. I have to say, just for clarity, is like, I also struggle with these things. I'm, not the greatest example, but I'm doing better, and the tools that I use help me. And Before Launcher is one of those things. Before Labs is the publisher of Before Launcher, which is for those using Android devices. This is a common thing that people will do is they'll swap out the stock launcher that comes with your phone with a more customizable launcher. And so we're in that category of applications. Before Launcher is available from the Google Play Store, and it's free for the most part. We have constructed our app to be mostly free, and so buying the pro version is more about supporting development. So we try to keep the limits on what can be done with the Before Launcher to the minimum.
So I think that's great. I think that gives us a little bit of an understanding. When I have installed Before Launcher, the first thing that comes to mind is how this is a completely different interface without icons. Before is more of a text-based approach. And I just wanted you to weigh in on what's the main difference? Why to do that big shock? Does it make sense? Does it matter on my screen time? Is it going to make me a different person just by seeing letters instead of seeing icons on my screen?
Yes, I think the answer there is for a lot of people, and we get feedback from customers through reviews and also through emails, that there's a bit of like magic component to this, is that by changing to the text-based format, and I probably should describe that, changing in a very passive way allows people to disengage a little bit from the phone. And anything you can do to disengage from doing things that you really don't want to do is a great thing. But let's go back in time and, review the history of computers and applications. So it used to be that, devices, there were times when you just bought a machine that did one thing, and it was all about remember and type. Probably the nearest equivalent that people have experience with today is going into the command line to perhaps do some customization on your PC or desktop. So you're doing things, you're remembering, you're typing, and essentially this plays right into, our mode of thinking is that we want people to, not throw away their phone, but we want them to have the phone. We want them to get in, get their things done, and get out. In the days of remember and type, when there are no icons, this is not a problem. You wouldn't go in there. You could go in there to play, but largely people were going in there single-minded, focused, and getting something done. So along come smartphones, and I should probably say along comes, even on PCs, graphical user interfaces. And you have probably seen many people's desktops, their computer desktops, filled with icons. And that same practice carried over into smartphones. And so what are the advantages of icons? I mean, those things, they're very useful. I mean, it is a way to tap on that icon and launch the thing that it is indicating. However, there are some things that go with icons. And those things icons are often packed with affordances or cues to do something that you may or may not want to do. An example would be like if you see an icon that is a thought bubble and it's got 3 dots in it, that affordance there, that cue is really trying to tell you, hey, you might be interested in sending some messages. It's really the app developer has created the icon specifically in those cases to get you to launch that. And so that's where that's where we're at with icons. It, the advantages of them, it does allow you to pack a lot of things on a screen. You can have like that crayon desktop, you can have a lot of icons on your phone, and that represents all the things that you could do. Kind of, I mean, you can often go well beyond what you can see on one screen. And so there is another disadvantage. It is hard to search for those things. You have to go through multiple swipes to get to these things. So is this making sense so far?
Absolutely, it is. It is. So for me, I think one thing that I appreciate when it comes to simple interfaces is how less attractive they can be and how less busy. So one of the things that has always drawn me to the Light Phone 2, and the reason why I keep it for such a long time, is because it's a very quiet and calm interface. Not only is text based, but there are very few notifications or signals that prompt me to pick up the phone. So, for example, instead of seeing a one, two, or three, I just see a star that notifies me, okay, you have a text message. And even they have allowed to completely hide that, right? So if you don't want the star, if you don't want the notification that you have something unattended, it will not show up right away on the lock screen of the device. How is Before Launcher better in that sense? You have explained a little bit about, the history of how user interfaces have evolved. And also you explained that this makes a little bit of a difference because it's a little bit calmer, it's a little bit different. But a lot of people want user customization. So how far do you go into allowing some of these things? And what do you say, no, this is the line. We are not going to cross it because we want to protect your attention.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, so, we get a lot of requests for features, and many of them have to do with trying to drive our particular launcher in the direction of busier grid-like launchers that exist out there that you can customize a lot and do things like that. So we're in that position where we feel funny saying, well, we can't do that or we don't want to do that. But we do have an ethos where we really are trying to make sure that we're as minimal as possible, but as functional as necessary. And an example of that you're talking about here is where you're badging things. You're talking about having like a little indicator that says you've got some messages. So we haven't done that so far in the Before Launcher. We've gotten a lot of requests for it. We probably will. We will probably also make it optional for people to turn that on and off. But with the notification filter that we have, we think that, if people are using that in the right way, shunting off unimportant notifications to a place where you can go look at them and largely probably delete them, and reserving the pull down status bar for the important notifications, we think that does a lot of it without having the badges. The other thing that I want to talk about with text is that because compared to icons, because they're so big, you're trying to actually spell out something with words, is that your home screen becomes kind of necessarily only the important things. And with the Before Launcher, we really do try to drive people to make choices about what appears in the home screen. Now, everything else is still available, and you can search for those everything else is fairly easily. But if you've got only, let's say, 6 things on the home screen, and those are truly your most important things, that really does aid the idea of, go in, get it done, and get out, because you're not going to be tempted by, a Candy Crush logo. By the way, play Candy Crush if you like it and want to.
So, one thing that you mentioned is that you get a lot of requests. And another thing that I kind of think about is, have you gotten any stories or any reviews that kind of come to your mind that say, this has helped me, right? This is a little bit of a imagery trick to a certain degree, right? Customizing your launcher and making it text-based oriented instead of icon-based is something that can help some people. But it's not going to cure, quote unquote, the main issue, which is compulsive use, or maybe you still have access to the social media, but now it looks text based. But I wonder if there are any stories or reviews of people that you have said, I ended up using this app less because I didn't see the icon, the attractiveness, the color right away. Instead, because I saw this calmer interface, I was able to create maybe a better habit over time. I'm wondering if you guys have gotten any feedback, or maybe it's another feature like the filtering notifications feature or hiding apps. You guys have some of those features on your pro version and on the free version. So, what is it that has helped people reduce their screen time while still keeping productivity on kind of like the foreground?
Yeah, that I would encourage anybody that's, really curious is to go and look at the reviews for the before launcher and other similar launchers. But I can speak to before launcher. Again, I'm going to refer myself back to the claim I made at the beginning. I still struggle with these things. Having a calm home screen doesn't change everything, but it's kind of like throwing out all the chocolate. If it's not in your house, you're less likely to drive to the store and go get it. What users are telling us is that, and it's a very consistent story, is that the before launcher has allowed them to reduce their screen time. And the thing that they point to most is the notification filter. And I think that's really, because they have made intelligent choices about what's important and what's not. And it's kind of an easy way. You can kind of do all this stuff within Android settings, but it's an easier way for people to say, this is important, this is not. And I think most of the time people are, and we've heard this from users too, is that they go in and they look at these filtered notifications, the ones that are less important. And really what they end up doing is just saying, delete them all. They look at them, they go, I never really need to look at these things. We should probably create a feature where things are automatically deleted. We're a little hesitant to do that, throw away notifications because they could be important. So yeah, we do get that feedback. I think the word calm is used a lot. You were mentioning that. People say it calms things down. And you're right. Obviously, there's nothing that we're going to be able to really change about, going into social media or looking at YouTube and doom scrolling. Once you get into the application, you're kind of outside the wrapper of the before launcher. But the idea is kind of like create a bit of a speed bump for getting into those things. But again, by all means, if that's how you want to spend your time, put YouTube right in your front home screen and spend all day on it.
One thing that I want to explore is how has your life changed as adopting this approach, right? So you are now working on this project and maybe getting involved on some digital minimalist principles. You say that you struggled. So talk to me about this is funny because is what was your life before launcher and what is your life after before launcher, and what other habits did you pick up in order to complement, right? Like we said, this is not a panacea, it's not a utopia. It's just another tool to help you on the way. But what are some of these other things that have helped you that you can share with our audience?
Right. I think the main thing that works for me is when I go into my device and I've got the 10 things that I need on the home screen. I don't often really go and look at swipe to the left and see the list of the 80 other apps that I've got on there. So generally it has helped me focus in on what I'm actually doing as opposed to like going through the list and seeing 20 more of these things in an icon format. So that really does help me. And sometimes I think I probably should go into the home screen and actually uh, edit that out a little bit more. I could probably go from where I'm at right now, which is 10 to about 5. So a little bit more focus on that. In terms of how has it changed? I remember a time when I was like playing a card game called Cribbage. Maybe you've heard of it. And so it's easy to get involved in that. So this is something else that I did is that it would kind of keep track of how much time I spent on it. And over the course of like, let's say weeks of using this, and by the way, I got quite good at playing the game, or much better. I went, you know what? Over the course of weeks, I spent like a day playing this. And so I think becoming aware of how much time you spend on things has really helped me. We do have on the before launcher a digital wellness feature that shows how many times that you've opened your device, basically that you've unlocked it and looked at it. And that can be an encouragement for people to like try to manage that to a better average level. But I would say the other things that have complemented are really the more of the Pomodoro techniques where you're saying, I'm just going to be spending 10 minutes doing this focused. And that helps me because I think, it's impossible to pay attention. If you've got an hour's work in front of you, it's impossible to pay attention to something for an hour. At least it's impossible for me. So pay attention to it for the 10 minutes, take a small break, come back to it, do another 10 minutes.
You mentioning the Pomodoro technique there is very helpful because that is a good method, especially when you're first starting to create more focus in your life. I think that helps a lot because since smartphones have damaged a lot of our attention and our ability to focus for extended period of times, restarting in manageable chunks. Let's say I'm going to work on 5 minutes on this, I'm going to focus on it. And then the next day you go over 1% better. So it's instead of 5 minutes, you do 6 minutes. And then slowly you build up yourself to maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes. And all of a sudden you are in the 1 hour. I read for an hour, but you need to start in those manageable steps. And I think that's actually a good practical tip that people can take home and say, okay, I'm going to start restoring my attention by practicing 1 minute at a time, 2 minutes at a time. And then over time, these improvements just get better and better. And you have the ability to just do more of life, more of the things that you want to do instead of all of the advertisements and all of the other amazing and crazy also things that the smartphone provides. Joel, I want to thank you for that. As we start wrapping up, I want to know a little bit more about what are some of the plans that Before has for the future? As a developer, as a team that you guys are helping people to make these interfaces a little bit simpler. What is coming down the pipeline that people can look forward to, and how can they interact and support these happenings?
Right. Yeah. It's all with, Android and obviously other smartphone apps. It's always a moving target. Of course, there are always new operating system releases, which can, either sometimes impinge or enable certain things to be done that we couldn't do before. So we're going to try to keep up with those. But directly in our plans is to do more digital wellness type of features, which includes monitoring screen time and showing that to people where they spend most of their time. That can be helpful. Although we have shied away, we published this thing 5 years ago, and we've intentionally kind of shied away from kind of being the parent on these things. But we get a lot of requests for it. And so we think that while the speed bump approach is better, to pay attention to the locking and unlocking, we're going to probably be doing more of those digital wellness things, including screen time monitoring. A lot of and again, like all app developers, we find that there are edges that need to be sanded to make them nice and smooth. And so we're going to continue to work on those things. The Before launcher is in active development. As an example, we're right now we're involved in doing testing for the next release, which is meant to make the onboarding experience much better for people. And that's another part of this. It's funny to talk about the Before launcher because unlike all the other app developers, shouldn't say all the other ones, but we're not really trying to keep people engaged with our app. We're never trying to steal anybody's attention. We're trying to actually give it back. I get where all the other developers are coming from because they're in an arms race with people's attention. And so they have to do that. In a sense, we're kind of a wrapper around that, and we stay out of that game. And we, again, as far as the future, and you mentioned this earlier, we're trying to make intelligent decisions that, help people. And that's been the great thing about working on the Before launcher. I'm helping people directly. We're helping people directly. And we want to stay in that mode of helping people.
You mentioned something that I thought was salient to our conversation, and that is that a lot of app developers are on this race to the bottom of the kind of like attention grabbing methods, right? So tricking you into spending more time on their app or spending more money on their app. And I just wanted to kind of get your take on maybe advice, because new products do need to happen and there are new solutions to old problems. But what can someone do to maybe not participate as actively on those attention grabbing apps and start focusing on attention restoring products, or also just boredom, just to just be bored again and to create more space for their thinking, for their creativity? What are some of the things that you can see going forward that society and people in general can do?
Yeah, this is being a parent, and coming from an earlier time in the previous century. I used to say a lot that boredom is not really something to be avoided. It is a gateway to self-discovery, to figuring out what it is that you want to do. And so I kind of encourage that over and over again. It's okay to be bored. And again, I'm not, like I said, I played cribbage. It was fun. But I think there are other things that you can do. There are a variety of productivity books. You're probably aware of Getting Things Done, that method. And those things can certainly be adapted. So I would say that outside of the phone, try to develop some habits that are in line with these productivity boosters. And I'd say look in yourself and find out what it is that you would be doing if you weren't on this phone and weren't letting your attention be stolen. Now, again, I have to qualify and say that basically we're all walking around with a supercomputer in our pockets or in our hands. And there's a lot of good that comes from that. And again, as you're mentioning, there's probably things coming out and things being done that are going to be helpful and that we need to do those. We should probably embrace those things. But I think every time one of those things comes along, and I do this myself, it's like, can I take this thing on, and what do I need to give up in order to take this thing on? I just can't keep adding to the things that I can do on the phone. So take on these new things that are better, but also try to give something else up on the phone.
I think that's a great principle, just replacing some of these less than ideal behaviors can create a more calmer experience, a better experience, and just a more empowering experience as well, that allows people to regain some of that attention, regain some of that productivity, but also just regain themselves. And I really appreciate that suggestion of taking on new things, but also leaving those maybe less helpful items and reducing interaction with them.
Yeah, I liked what you said earlier about the practicing this and getting better and better at it with the Pomodoro, where you're just increasing. And it's a bit like strength training. If you've ever done that, is that, it can be very hard in the beginning, but eventually it becomes kind of its own, it's like a flywheel. It builds up its own momentum. And again, I'm thinking of strength training because boy, the first 3 weeks are pretty tough and you're walking around feeling like you're walking around on twigs, but eventually you get beyond that and you're kind of motivated by lifting more or getting more reps in. And so it's the very same thing with these habits that you can build with your phone and outside your phone. You start to feel good about those things. And I think that's when things become more permanent.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'm thankful for your responses. Thank you for being in our podcast today. Joel, I like to leave my guests with the final word. So please give us anything that you want to give us, any advice or any things, how to contact you, just whatever it is that's coming to your mind that you want to leave our listeners with. This is your time.
Okay. Yeah. I think, I would say that, again, just to repeat, 4Launcher is for Android. You can get it from Google Play Store. And I would encourage people to give it a try, give other minimalist launchers a try. And one way to reach out to us is to leave a review, and it can be anywhere from 1 to hopefully 5 stars, and leave remarks there. And we do pay attention to those things. And there's an email address that we like people to send things to if they have specific and longer forms. And that email address is feedback@beforelabs.com. And of course, we also have a website, beforelabs.com. You can go there and there's a form to fill in things. And so I would say, give us a try, leave us some comments, and we're always developing. And most of what the Before Launcher is today, I would say, 80% came from user input. And we're looking for more of that.
That was our time with Joel Butler from Before Labs. If you want to check out some of their content and their app, it will be linked on the description of this podcast. Thank you for listening to Moving Offline. As always, your feedback and guest recommendations are always taken into account. We appreciate the community that we have built, and I hope that you learned something today that allows you to become better in this 2025 and beyond, just to create a better world, not only for yourself, but also for others. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you in the next podcast.